Peace and blessings, family. Martin Chris Glenn, Masternomics. We're going to be talking today about financial freedom, like we always talk about, being financially free. But we're talking about the frequencies of freedom. Frequency, freedom. Everything has a frequency, right? So we're talking about the frequencies of freedom, how to raise our thoughts and vibrations to be on that frequency. So it's a very important topic. You know, Masternomics, we focus on self-mastery, helping you take yourself to the next level. In order to get to that next level, we got to raise your frequency. Got to raise our vibrations, raise our frequency. So let's get into it. Let's get it going. Let's get excited. Let's get pumped up. Let's share the screen and let's rock and roll, right? So financial empowerment, mastering the frequencies of freedom. You know, when we're talking about freedom, think about it on your personal level, your personal perspective, to be free, right? And let's talk about frequencies, okay? Now, everything is vibrating. We always talk about it. Everything is vibrating. There's nothing that's still. Everything is in motion. So once you get a better understanding of these universal laws, and universal laws supersede everything, they supersede all your beliefs, they supersede all your limitations, right? Once you understand that everything in this universe is in movement, everything is vibrating. Well, if everything vibrates, everything has a frequency, right? So everything in the universe is made up of energy, right? Which vibrates at different frequencies. The energy that we emit also vibrates at certain frequencies. Our thoughts, feelings, and energy, they vibrate at a certain frequency. When we focus our thoughts on something, we emit a signal with a specific frequency. So just think of it on a simple term, right? So if everything is energy, there's nothing that's not energy, right? And energy cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. Energy is. It just takes on another form, okay? So think about yourself, your energy, right? When you was a baby, when you was a kid, you were energy, okay? Now you might stand however tall you stand. You're as developed as however you're developed, right? You didn't die. You just took on another form. So everything is in movement. Everything moves, all right? Thought moves. Everything moves, right? So on a vibrational level, if everything is moving, everything is vibrating. Some things are just, they appear to be solid, right? But they're vibrating so slow that you perceive it as still. But there's really nothing still. Everything moves, right? If you get a high-powered microscope, you'll see that. But think of it on this simple term. Everything moves, so therefore everything moves at a certain frequency, all right? So on this physical world, this physical level of us walking and talking as people, we can shake hands, we're at a certain vibratory level that we call it physical, all right? Well, everything has a frequency, okay? So the money you make has a frequency, right? So the money you produce money at a certain frequency. If you work a job for someone and they pay you X amount of dollars, and I can calculate what you make every week and then every month, every year, whatever that amount is, whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200,000, right? That is your financial frequency. That's the frequency of your finances, okay? So your life is gonna operate at that frequency level, right? So now, in order to raise your frequency, you got to raise your vibrations, raise your thought patterns to get on another frequency, okay? So we have to raise our vibrations so that we're vibrating on a higher frequency if we want more money. If it's money that you're after, right? If it's success, however that looks to you, you have to raise your vibrations to get on another frequency. So in other words, you can't think the same way you've been thinking, or else you will do the same things and you'll get the same results, right? So you can't fix a problem with the same thinking that produced the problem. Something has to shift. You can't solve a problem with the same mindset that produced that problem. And if we're talking about your life, your problems are situations that you created. You have that power. But guess what? If you mess it up, then you can fix it. So everything moves at a certain vibration, and vibrations manifest at certain frequencies. All right. So frequency. Frequency is a term used to describe how often something occurs or repeats within a given time period. This is one definition of frequency. But think about frequency, what we were just talking about, but think about this definition of frequency. It's a measure of the number of times an event or phenomenon happens in a specific duration. Frequency, a term used to describe how often something occurs. So now we're talking about the frequency of an event. All right. The frequency, how often an event happens, or does it happen frequently? So this aspect of frequency is dealing with frequently. How often does something happen? Okay. Now, take that, grasp that understanding. We have the frequency, which is the vibratory level of things, manifests on a frequency level. Then how the frequency, how frequently something happens. So think about this: frequency and frequency, or frequency and frequently. All right. Now, think about the problems that happen in people's lives or your life, the financial situations that happen. People say, well, I'm always just above broke. I just make just enough money to pay my power bill. I never have anything left, right? And I say, well, how often does that happen? Man, it's the same way all my life that's happened. So it happens frequently, over and over again. Why? Because your thinking has not shifted. You haven't raised your vibrational thinking. So the poor results that are happening, your poor habits happen frequently over and over again. Okay? So therefore, the habits of lack, depression, barely paying your bills, that is the vibratory level that you're thinking on. That's your frequency level. So if the power bill is $500 and you got $480 and you pay that, and you got to make an arrangement for the other 20, and you do this over and over and over again, right? Frequently you're doing it. That's because that's the frequency you're on. You're on a just enough frequency, right? You're only manifesting that just enough to get the things that you want. Okay. So frequently occurring are done on many occasions, in many cases, or in quick succession. These things frequently happen. And when I'm talking and I'm training people how to raise their financial frequency, I'm always talking to people that are in survival mode. A lot of times, survival mode, right? What's survival mode? Trauma, prolonged grief, stress, or even burnout can cause our brains to opt into booting into survival mode. Trauma, prolonged grief, stress, burnout. So people that are working long hours and they still don't have enough money to generate freedom, to free themselves from the job. They're not generating enough money to do things that a free person would like to do, to eat better foods, okay, to go on a trip, to go on a vacation, to spend more time with your children. This is the things that freedom produces. But most people on this planet are stuck in survival mode. Okay. How are they stuck in survival mode? Because of trauma, because of prolonged grief, because of stress. What do I mean by trauma? They're stuck in traumatic experiences that they constantly focus on, and they keep doing it over and over again. It could be something simple. It could be, somebody has been evicted, and thus they focus on the lack of having the rent money. So they always focus on what they don't have. It could be someone that's in business, and they always focus on what they call the failure. They focus on why it won't work. And that's traumatic. That makes you feel sad. it produces a trauma in you. It shifts you into thinking that you don't have enough. And so because you focus on that, you just survive and you just make just enough and you settle and you do the opposite of be successful. You conform because you're stuck in a survival mode. Most people are stuck in a survival mode. They're in a rat race, they call it. So you're working a 9 to 5 and they're just going over and over again. They work, they get a paycheck. They never have enough for any freedom. It pays the bills, right? But then in order to keep going, they have to go back to work. And then because of the way the economy is, it's not enough. And sometimes they have to get 2, 3 jobs. Okay. But a gallon of milk starts to cost more. So it's never enough. And they're stuck in this survival mode with their back against the wall. Never have enough time to do any self-care. Right. Never have enough time to do any meditating. Never have enough time to do any reading. Right. Never have enough time to do any personal development, working on mastering yourself, finding out what you actually like, finding out the problems you have, the traumas that you have embedded in you. People don't have that time because they're surviving. They're constantly just surviving. And the orchestrators of this chaos that we live in called society knew what they were doing, because if I keep you in survival mode, you're only going to make just enough, right? And so when people are stuck in that thinking, then that traps them, right? And so they can only do that. They're only living off of just the survival aspect, right? So what has to happen is something has to shift in order to get you to another level of thinking, right? In order to shift the mind to get out of the survival mode, right? What has to shift? Your thinking has to shift, right? But it just doesn't happen overnight, right? Something has to, and a lot of times it is a traumatic event that happens, and that's what shifts you, okay, to get out of survival mode. And then you can stop just surviving and you can start thriving, right? So think about surviving means to continue to exist. And that's what animals do, right? So animals are just surviving. They literally just survive because they're existing, right? So surviving means to continue to exist, while to thrive can be defined as to grow or develop well, to prosper or to flourish. So if a dog, a cat, rooster, a bird, they just exist. Okay, so they only need whatever they need in order to just exist. Okay, so they're existing. So they can't fully just control their environment. They don't have the ability to create their own environment. So it's no way that us as thinking beings that have a mind should just be living the same way as a being that does not, or as the dog, the cat, the bird, right? Because if you have a mind, you have a brain, you have the ability to create your environment, to create the outcomes that you want. With your imagination, you literally can think things into existence, okay? You have the ability to alter your surroundings, right? And that's the beauty of business. So we're talking about shifting from surviving to thriving, right? Everyone knows how to survive, right? Everyone knows how to just get by. But in the entrepreneurial world, so when you step into entrepreneurship, you're going to shift from just a survival aspect, right? You want to shift into a thriving aspect. If not, then there's no need to be in business, right? Because business should empower you. It should produce freedom for you. It should give you the things that the average person can't. But I ain't gonna say they can't have, but don't have access to, because you become the controller. You become the thinker, right? You become the person with the joystick, making the decisions that you want to make. Okay, so therefore you produce things and you begin to thrive, as opposed to just survive, right? And so that's the level of understanding that we have to shift from survival mode to thrival mode, right? Because surviving means to continue to exist, while thrive can be defined as to grow or develop well or to prosper, to flourish. So if we're talking about thriving, we're talking about flourishing. So when you're going into business, you need an accountability partner. You need somebody holding you accountable. Now, a beautiful thing, if you're in business and you're married and have a spouse and y'all are in business together, you're supposed to hold each other accountable, right? Somebody's supposed to be pushing someone and keeping the eye on the prize to say we're supposed to prosper and flourish. We don't go into business with the same thinking of just working for someone else controlling everything. No, if you're the controller, then you have to do more than what the average person does, right? Then you produce a thriving environment. So when we're talking about, we're not just talking about success, we're talking about massive success, right? Success on a high level. And the highly successful perform at a high degree because they're not just surviving. When you think about the most wealthy and the elite, they say the 1 or 2%, they're not in survival mode. So if you're not in a survival mode, guess what? You can write your history books because you got time to study history. And then you got the power and the money and the ability to alter things because you're in a thriving mindset. So once we get out of this survival mode and get into the creation mode, then we start to create. And that's what we have to do. We're creators, right? So we're not here to just survive. We're here to thrive, and we're here to create. Okay. So getting out of survival mode, acknowledge your situation, recognizing that you're in survival mode is the first step towards change. Right. So recognize where you're at, the position that you're in. That's what you have to do first and foremost. First and foremost, that's the key. Acknowledge your situation, recognize that you're in survival mode. That's the first step. So you got to be able to look in the mirror and say, if I'm just barely getting by, if I only always have a minimal amount, if I get a tax return every year and then I'm still broke within a month or two, if I don't know about investing, if I don't have any investments, if I don't have any insurance policy, I don't have anything to leave the ones I love, which is my children, right? Then I'm just surviving while I'm here on the planet. Because guess what? One day you will expire, right? Now we know your energy. So you're just going to take on another form, but you won't be here in the physical, right? So therefore, what are you doing with that time, right? So you gotta, in order to get out of it, you gotta acknowledge where you're at. And a lot of times, people get in business, they shift, but then they get stuck, and they start just surviving in the business. So the business isn't really moving or progressing. So you gotta, I always tell people, where are you? Know where you're at right now, right? Know where you're at to get out of something. Once you do that, it produces freedom. Once you take your power and you acknowledge that you got the power to change it, that power produces freedom. Freedom is the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. The power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. So this is what happens when you take the power and you control your life. You become free in every aspect. It produces freedom in every aspect, right? And that's what we're talking about. The frequency of freedom, right? In two ways, frequently and frequency, right? Because once you think different, your mind will shift, you'll start vibrating, and you'll get on a higher frequency. So if I'm looking at myself and say, look, I've just been surviving for the past 10 years. I want more. I got to do more. I'm going to think differently. So even the thought is going to make me do things different, right? And so people that are poor have a poverty mindset and they have poor habits. Habits is habitual. Habits just means you do something frequently over and over again. People that are successful have success habits, right? So if we're thinking negatively and it's producing poor results, we got to change our thinking and change our speaking. And that comes with simple form, first step, knowing where you are, and then you start to affirm what it is you want to manifest or create. So then affirmations start to shift you, right? But what happens when you start thinking differently, you become free, right? You're no longer, what are you really free from? You're free from the control of others, right? Because people that don't do anything for themselves, most of them don't do it because of what someone else told them. They've allowed someone else's limitations to be placed on them. So I talk to people all the time and they say, I would start the business, but my mother told me I shouldn't do that. My father told me I shouldn't do that. My friend who's never done any business told me I shouldn't do that. So they listen to other people and their thoughts control them. So you're a slave to poor thinking, right? But when you become free, you think for yourself and you're not afraid to lose or fail. So thus you become a winner just by thinking that. It produces freedom. Financial literacy. Once you become free and not held down by anyone else, your finances start to work for you and what you want to do. See, right now, most people are working for someone else and they're creating someone else's dream and they're a cog in a wheel or in a system. So financial literacy, possessing the skills and knowledge on financial matters to confidently take effective action that best fulfills an individual's personal, family, and global community goals. Financial literacy, how does your freedom affect your finances? So most people aren't free, so their finances are shackled. So they don't, their money really doesn't provide what they wanted to provide for themselves personally, their family, or their community, right? Because they're living check to check. They're living off of survival mode. But once you grasp what financial literacy is, finances that affect every aspect of your life and you control it, you make better decisions, right? So right now it's tax time in the United States, and you got millions upon millions of people that's going to get large sums of money at one time. But most of them are stuck in a poverty frequency. They're stuck in a slave frequency, and they're not doing anything that free people do, right? So they're not controlling their lives. They're moving off of set patterns that have already been laid out for them, okay? So they're on a poverty frequency. You see what I'm saying? So you got to become free. The way you become free is you free yourself, free your mind, and the rest will follow. So financial literacy, understanding how money affects every aspect of your life. And therefore you start to move and act as a free person. Okay. You start to invest in yourself. Invest in yourself could be just doing what you're doing right now. It's listening to something that making you think something you've never thought, do something you never did, because it all starts with thought, right? So freedom, economic freedom, personal freedom, social freedom, intellectual freedom. Economic freedom, freedom pertains to the ability of individuals and businesses to make economic decisions, engage in voluntary transactions. That's simply to say how you want to feed yourself, right? How you want to feed your family. You know how many people work in a job and they don't even like the job? And they might do it for 10, 20 years. Personal freedom, right? Being able to go when you want to go somewhere, right? To being able to travel. Social freedom, right? Being able to think for yourself, not say, I have to be Democrat, Republican, this or that. I can make my own decisions. And intellectual freedom, right? Using this to be free, not bound by someone else's religions or social constructs that they created, studying, using the mind, developing it, increasing better thought patterns that's going to get better results. So all of these is frequencies, right? And if you notice, certain people in society vibrate on certain frequencies. What does that mean? They have habits that they do frequently. These habits that you do frequently will propel you to a higher frequency. And then once you do that, you become one with everything. or as they say, one with the universe. You realize that everything is everything. You have access to all the power that you want. So then you take accountability for where you're at in life, right? And this is why I do this, to show people that they have the power to take accountability for their lives, right? And on a simple aspect, you take accountability for what you're putting into your body. How many people go to the doctor and they say, "Oh, you're not eating properly." But if you got to buy your food processed from somebody else, and the reason why you should eat better, but the reason why you're not eating better is because of the price of the food. Because you say, well, the good food, organic or non-processed food, costs so much, right? Well, you have the ability to make more money. You got all the power in the world. You got the ability to not just make the money and buy food, you can grow your own food. So this is what freedom should do. It should produce, this is what raising your frequency should do. It should produce freedom. Freedom in every aspect to do whatever it is that you want to do, right? There's no one stopping you but you. You have that power, right? You have the ability to control your life, to shift your life, to create the life that you want. And so this is what this company is about. It's to show you different aspects of how you can free yourself, okay? But everything is a frequency. The way you shift your frequency is you shift your thoughts, you shift your thinking, right? So you got to read more about what it is that you want. And you got to know where you're at in life, okay? Because the frequencies of freedom, right, produce financial freedom. Okay. Everything is a frequency. What you do frequently determines your frequency. So what you do frequently financially determines your financial frequency. So if you're poor, it's because you're frequently having poor thoughts and you're doing what poor people do. You got the habits of a poor person. Poor people think lack. They always talk about what they can't do. They always talk about what somebody else did to them. They're stuck in victim mode, and that victim mode puts you in a survival mode. If you're always the victim, you're always going to be trying to survive. You see what I'm saying? It's like the dog or the cat. A domesticated dog or cat won't eat until the master wants it to eat. And many of us have been domesticated in that sense. But with this information and you tapping into the power inside of you, it produces freedom. So free your mind and the rest will follow. Check it out. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment. This is why we do these classes. And, go through, check out all the previous classes, check out a lot of the content, share this, and let's grow and let's do it. Peace.